Hi Dan, here we are again, and this week we ask the question, it's all about the law, and I'm sure that's the question on everybody's lips. Your take?
Yes, thank you, Mark. In our last chat, we referred to the United Rugby Championship and the fact that the laws of rugby are being so badly applied and there's so many interpretations of the law. So to talk this week, which is ahead of Rassie Erasmus going to see World Rugby next weekend on the 30th and the 31st, there's still no news about whether that will be a public forum. I went and reread the laws. I went and looked up the laws on Rugby World Cup's, World Rugby's website. So it's up to date. And remember, Doc Craven always said, rugby has laws, all other games have rules. And I found it very interesting that what's still on the law book and what we're watching on the field. So for instance, they talk about rugby owes much of its appeal to the fact that it is played both to the letter and within the spirit of the law. So the letter and the spirit. It also talks about the backward pass, which we've talked about before. But then the one that really worries me is the ruck. So this is what is in the law book. It's law 15, the ruck, only some items. A ruck is formed when at least one player from each team are in contact, on their feet and over the ball on the ground, at least one. Players involved in all stages of the ruck must have their heads and shoulders above their hips. The arriving player must arrive from on sides, may not join in the side. A player must bind onto a teammate. A player must again join immediately or retreat when the ruck is over. Now here's the key one to me is, once a ruck has formed, a player may not handle the ball unless he carried it in. Once the ball is on the ground, they've got to form over it and play it on the ground. So now the law goes on forever. So I'm not going to go into that, but the law is clear that it's one from each side over the ball has to be on the ground. What we see at the moment is one pile up after another. We see players with their hands in the ruck, falling over each other. It's absolutely against the law. So how does a coach coach? How does a coach understand it? And it's being allowed. So that is one of the key laws that absolutely has to change. And it's still in the law book and something has to be done. One of the others that people always ask me, how come the scrum feed is so crooked? Well, listen to it. The law on the scrum says the scrum half must feed the ball straight. The scrum half may align their shoulder on the middle line of the scrum, thereby standing a shoulder width closer to their side of the scrum. That is actually the law. So they're not feeding it crooked. They're allowed to align their left shoulder with the middle of which means the scrum half is standing under his prop's feet, which means the crooked feed is legal. So there's another law. So what I'm hoping is that when Rassie gets there, we hear what he has to say. My suggestion would be that to keep up with the laws, that some things need to change, and what those would be for me is we must go back to proper rucking, in other words, on your feet. The game is meant to play it on your feet. We must patrol the offsides. That's something that's gone wrong. We must make the assistant referees far more in control of who's offside and who's not. And it might even be that we create, rather than the hindmost foot, which is not applied at the moment, a meter gap. There must be a clear gap. The other one that I'd love to see is the forward pass. This thing about momentum and the ball picking up on momentum and therefore traveling forward is okay. Just pass it backwards. And the receiver has to be behind the player who passed. I'd like to see stricter control of taking the man out. That is extremely dangerous. A player is not even expecting impact and he just gets run away. And then for rugby to go back to being a fair contest for the ball. That is the absolute fundamental of that game, fair contacts. And then to wrap up, we see the United Rugby Championship, which has caused a lot of this stuff. We will now see teams in South Africa because we're off the red zone in the red list in the UK. So some teams will come to play here. But the reality of that is they'll play in late November, early December. So the European sides will then be hit by South Africa's heat. And we're not even accustomed to playing rugby in December. So to re-emphasize, I still don't know whether the United Rugby Championship is a good competition or not. And all that said, I know Rassie travels to Ireland to see World Rugby, and I want to wish him well. As you know, I didn't approve of the video because I'm old-fashioned. I believe you shouldn't complain when you lose, but I think he has stirred the hornet's nest, and it's time, and I hope he comes away with a good result.
Thanks, Dan. As ever, you make a great point. Cheers.